He assumed it was only a healing pod until the alien princess cuddled close. Final part. Veloria, Naire said, a note of pride in her voice despite her concerns. The oldest city on Lumeria. It's incredible, Ethan breathed, his scientist's mind already cataloguing questions about its construction and function. The captain cleared his throat impatiently. We must proceed, Princess. The council awaits. As they crossed the plain toward the Crystal City, Ethan noticed how the grasses beneath their feet changed color as they passed, creating a living pathway that marked their journey. In the distance, he could see vehicles hovering above the ground, moving between the crystal towers with silent efficiency. Your father, Ethan said carefully, is he on the High Council? He leads it, Naire replied. High Councillor Talon Velantis has guided Lumeria for 3 centuries. Ethan tried to process this. 3 centuries, how long do Lumerians live? Our natural lifespan is approximately 700 of your Earth years, she said matter-of-factly, though those who join the council often live much longer. The implications of this information made Ethan's head spin. He was 29, a mere infant by Lumerian standards. What could Naire, who must be at least several decades old, possibly see in him? As if reading his thoughts, Naire moved closer, her hand brushing his more deliberately this time. Age is measured differently here, she whispered. What matters is not the time one has existed, but the experiences one has embraced. By that measure, you are far richer than many of my people who have lived centuries. The captain glanced back sharply, and Naire resumed her formal distance. But her words lingered in Ethan's mind as they approached the gleaming gates of Veloria, where a delegation waited to receive them. At the center of the welcoming party stood a tall, imposing figure draped in robes that seemed woven from living light. His skin was a deeper violet than Naire's, with constellations of light that formed intricate patterns across his exposed arms and face. His eyes, the same turquoise as Naire's, held wisdom and authority that made Ethan instinctively straighten. His posture. Father, Naire greeted, bowing her head slightly. High Councillor Talon's gaze moved from his daughter to Ethan, his expression unreadable. You bring an unexpected guest to your trials, daughter, he observed, his voice resonant and deep. How unconventional. The human found me at the sacred pools, Naire explained. The forest guided him there. Did it? Talon replied, a hint of skepticism in his tone. Or perhaps something else guided his steps. His penetrating gaze made Ethan feel transparent, as if the High Councillor could see every thought, every feeling he had experienced with Naire. I mean no disrespect, Ethan said, finding his voice. I'm here as a representative of Earth, hoping to foster understanding between our worlds. Noble sentiments, Talon said, though his tone suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. We shall see if your presence here serves understanding or disruption. He turned to the guards. Escort the human to the diplomatic quarters. Naire, you will come with me to prepare for the trials. As the guards moved to separate them, Naire's eyes met Ethan's one last time, conveying a silent message. Be careful. This is bigger than both of us now. Watching her walk away with her father, surrounded by counselors and attendants, Ethan couldn't help but feel he had stumbled into something far more complex than a chance encounter in the forest. Whatever connection had sparked between them, it now faced the scrutiny of centuries-old traditions and a father whose lifespan encompassed multiple human generations. As the crystal gates of Veloria closed behind them, Ethan wondered if their brief moment of intimacy by the waterfall would remain just that, a beautiful memory, impossible to sustain in the light of day and the weight of Naire's royal responsibilities. The diplomatic quarters of Veloria resembled a living terrarium, more than a guest room. Walls of transparent crystal offered panoramic views of the city, while plants grew from recessed gardens in the floor and ceiling, their root systems visible through the crystalline surfaces. A bed that appeared to be made of the same soft moss from the forest stood in the center, surrounded by furniture that seemed to have been grown rather than built. Ethan paced the room, checking his communicator every few minutes. The TEI would be expecting his daily report soon, but what could he possibly tell them? That he'd encountered an alien princess, shared an intimate moment by a sacred pool, and was now essentially a diplomatic prisoner in a crystal city. They'd recall him immediately, citing psychological instability. A soft chime announced a visitor. The door, a panel of translucent crystal, slid open to reveal Lieutenant Tala, the female guard from earlier. "The human must prepare," she announced. Formally, "The first trial begins shortly, and your presence has been requested." "My presence?" Ethan asked, surprised. "Why would I be needed at Naire's trial?" Tala's expression remained neutral. "The High Council did not share their reasoning with me. I am to bring you to the observation chamber and ensure you are appropriately attired." She gestured to a set of garments laid out on a nearby surface. A tunic and pants made from a material that shimmered like the night sky, deep blue with points of light that moved subtly across the fabric. "These will help you blend in," she explained, "though nothing can fully disguise your human nature." As Ethan changed behind a privacy screen, he considered Tala's words. "You say that like it's a deficiency," he called to her. "Isn't it?" she responded. "Your species lives mere moments compared to ours. Your bodies are fragile, your emotions volatile." Ethan emerged, the Lumerian garments fitting surprisingly well. "And yet your princess seems to find those qualities interesting rather than inferior." For the first time, Tala's composed expression faltered slightly. "Princess Naire has always been unconventional in her interests. It is both her strength and her vulnerability. You care about her," Ethan observed, "not just as her guard." "I have served the royal family for 80 years, Tala said, a hint of pride in her voice. "I have watched Naire grow from a curious child into the woman she is today. Yes, I care for her well-being." She gestured for him to follow her into the corridor. As they walked through the crystal hallways of the palace, Ethan marveled at the city visible below them. Valoria was even more impressive from within, a harmonious blend of nature and structure, where buildings incorporated living elements and public spaces teemed with Lumerians going about their daily lives. "Your world is beautiful," Ethan said. "Sincerely, yes," Tala agreed, "which is why we protect it so fiercely." She glanced at him. "The High Council has maintained our isolation for millennia. Your presence here, and Princess Naire's interest in you, challenges thousands of years of tradition." They arrived at a vast chamber near the top of the central spire. One wall was entirely transparent, overlooking an enormous circular arena below. Dozens of Lumerians were already seated in the chamber, their skin tones ranging from pale lavender to deep indigo, all bearing the characteristic starlight patterns that seemed to indicate status or age. All conversation ceased as Ethan entered. He felt their eyes on him, curious, suspicious, judgmental. High Councillor Talon rose from his seat at the center of the chamber. "The human observer arrives," he announced, his voice carrying effortlessly through the space. "As my daughter has invoked the ancient right of witness trials, we shall permit his presence." An elderly Lumerian with skin so dark it was almost black stood up. "High Councillor, this is unprecedented. The human has no understanding of our customs, our history, or the significance of the trials, which is precisely why his perspective may prove valuable, Councillor Zephyrin," Talon replied smoothly. "An untainted observer sees with clear eyes what tradition might blind us to." Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that he was being used as a pawn in some political game he didn't understand. Nevertheless, he took the seat indicated for him at the edge of the chamber where the transparent floor offered a dizzying view of the arena below. "The first trial begins," announced a melodious voice from somewhere unseen. "The trial of mind." The arena floor below shifted, rearranging itself into a complex three-dimensional pattern that reminded Ethan of a massive chessboard, though with multiple levels and hundreds of pieces that glowed with different intensities. A door opened at one end of the arena, and Naire entered. She had changed into a simple white garment that left her arms bare, revealing the constellation patterns on her skin, glowing brighter than Ethan had seen before. Her emerald hair was braided elaborately, woven with small crystals that caught the light. Even from this distance, she radiated calm confidence. She approached the center of the arena and bowed to the observation chamber above. "Princess Naire Velantis," intoned the unseen announcer. To pass the trial of mind, you must solve the puzzle of resonance. You have 100 heartbeats. The pieces on the massive board began to pulse with light, creating a pattern that shifted constantly. Nairi studied it for a moment, then began to move, touching specific pieces in a sequence that seemed random to Ethan, but clearly followed some logic only she could see. As she touched each piece, it changed color, and the surrounding pieces responded, creating ripples of light across the board. Ethan leaned forward, fascinated by the complexity of the puzzle and the elegant efficiency of Naire's movements. She is aligning the energy flows, Tala explained quietly beside him. Each piece represents a node in Lumeria's resonance network. She must harmonize them all before time expires. Ethan watched as Naire worked her way through the puzzle, her movements becoming faster and more assured. With seconds remaining, she touched a final piece at the center of the board. All the pieces flashed simultaneously, then settled into a synchronized pulsing that spread outward in perfect concentric circles. The chamber erupted in appreciative murmurs. Even Councillor Zephyrin nodded grudgingly. "The first trial is complete," announced the voice. "Princess Nire has demonstrated mastery of mind." Naire looked up directly at the observation chamber, directly at Ethan, it seemed, and allowed herself a small smile before exiting the arena. "The second trial will commence after the alignment of the twin moons," Talon declared. "We shall reconvene then." As the councillors filed out, Tala remained by Ethan's side. "You wish to speak with her," she stated. "Not a question, but an observation." "Yes," Ethan admitted. "Is that possible?" Tala considered him for a long moment. "Follow." "Me," she finally said. "There is a brief period of rest between trials. I can grant you a few moments. No more." She led him down a series of winding passages until they reached a small garden enclosed in crystal. Nire sat beside a pool of luminescent water, her eyes closed in meditation. When they entered, she looked up, her expression brightening visibly at the sight of Ethan. "5 minutes," Tala said firmly, then stepped outside, closing the door behind her. Nire rose gracefully, crossing the garden in a few quick steps. Without hesitation, she took Ethan's hands in hers. "You're here," she said, her voice warm with relief. "I wasn't sure they would allow it." "Your father insisted, actually," Ethan said, "though I'm not entirely sure why." "My father does nothing without purpose," she replied, a shadow crossing her face. "But whatever his reasons, I'm grateful." She squeezed his hands. "Your presence gives me strength." "You were amazing in there," Ethan said sincerely. "I couldn't follow what you were doing, but it was beautiful to watch." Nire smiled. "The puzzle tests our understanding of Lumeria's energy networks, how all living things connect and influence each other." Her expression grew serious. "The next trial will be more difficult. The trial of body tests physical prowess, but also one's connection to Lumeria itself." "And the third?" Ethan asked. "The trial of spirit," she said softly. "It is different for each candidate. Some face their deepest fears, others their greatest desires." She looked away. "I don't know what form mine will take." Ethan gently turned, her face back toward his. "Whatever it is, you'll face it with the same grace you showed today." Her eyes searched his. "You barely know me, Ethan Mercer. Why do you have such faith in me?" "Because in less than a day you've shown me more honesty and courage than most people I've known for years," he replied. "And because—" He hesitated, aware of how absurd it would sound. They had known each other barely 24 hours. And, yet, the connection between them felt profound, as if the resonance Nire had described had somehow linked them on a fundamental level. "Because I feel like I've been waiting to meet you," he finished simply. "Across stars and species and everything. That should make us strangers to each other." Nire's skin glowed brighter at his words, the star-like points intensifying until she seemed to shimmer from within. "The resonance does not make mistakes," she whispered. "It brought you to that pool for a reason, Ethan." The door opened, and Tala reappeared. "Time is up," she announced. "The princess must prepare for the second trial." Nire squeezed his hands once more before releasing them. "Watch carefully," she said cryptically. What you see today may help us both understand. What comes next? As Tala led him back to the observation chamber, Ethan felt a growing certainty that the trials were about more than Naire's ascension to the council. Something larger was unfolding, something that involved him in ways he couldn't yet comprehend. The B. Second trial proved even more spectacular than the first. In a demonstration of physical prowess and elemental control, Naire had manipulated the very environment of the arena, commanding water, light, and even gravity itself to overcome a series of increasingly difficult obstacles. The council had watched with varying degrees of approval, though Ethan noticed that High Counselor Talon seemed more interested in observing his reactions than his daughter's performance. Now, as the twin moons of Lumeria aligned overhead, casting their combined light through the crystal dome of the final trial chamber, Ethan felt a growing tension in the air. This smaller, more intimate space held only the High Council and himself, 7 ancient Lumerians and 1 human, gathered to witness Naire's final challenge. The trial of spirit, Talon announced, his deep voice resonating through the chamber, reveals the true nature of the candidate. It strips away pretense and exposes the core of one's being. He turned to Ethan. Human, you have been permitted to witness this sacred rite because the resonance has somehow bound you to my daughter's path. What you see here must never be shared with your people. Ethan nodded solemnly. I understand. The center of the chamber floor became transparent, revealing Naire standing alone in a small room below. She wore a simple white garment, her emerald hair falling loose around her shoulders. She looked up, her eyes finding Ethan's for a brief moment before she nodded to her father. I am ready, her voice carried to them. Talon raised his hands, and the other counselors joined him, forming a circle. The star-like patterns on their skin began to pulse in unison, creating a rhythmic glow that intensified with each passing second. The air in the chamber grew thick with energy, making the hair on Ethan's arms stand on end. Begin, Talon commanded. The room below filled with swirling light that enveloped Naire completely. When it cleared, she was no longer alone. Standing before her was Ethan. Ethan gasped, looking at a perfect duplicate of himself facing Naire in the chamber below. What is this? He whispered. The trial manifests what lies deepest in the candidate's spirit, Counselor Zephyrin explained, his ancient eyes fixed on the scene below. It appears your presence has affected my granddaughter more profoundly than we anticipated. Below, the duplicate Ethan spoke. You must choose, Naire, it said in his voice. Your duty to Lumeria, or your heart's desire. The chamber shifted again, and a second figure appeared, High Counselor Talon, looking stern and unyielding. Centuries of tradition rest on your shoulders, this phantom Talon declared. Would you cast it aside for a fleeting connection with a being whose entire lifespan is but a moment to us? Naire looked between the two figures, her expression resolute. This is a false choice, she said clearly. You present duty and desire as opposing forces, but they need not be. The duplicate Ethan stepped closer to her. I can give you passion, adventure, discovery, but I cannot give you centuries. My life is brief, my world distant. The phantom Talon moved to her other side. I offer you power, influence, the chance to guide Lumeria for millennia, but at the cost of the very emotions that draw you to this human. Naire closed her eyes, and the star patterns on her skin began to pulse with increasing intensity. I reject the premise of this trial, she declared, her voice growing stronger. For too long, the Council has equated emotional detachment with wisdom, isolation with security. This human did not find the sacred pool by accident. The resonance itself guided him there, showing us a truth we have been blind to. The duplicate figures began to flicker and distort as Naire continued. Lumeria is dying, not physically but spiritually. Our isolation has become stagnation. Our longevity has become complacency. We have forgotten how to grow, how to change, how to truly live. In the observation chamber, the counselors shifted uncomfortably. Ethan noticed that while most looked troubled by Naire's words, Talon watched with what appeared to be satisfaction. Below, Naire opened her eyes, which now glowed with intense light. I choose both duty and desire, for they are not enemies, but allies. My duty to Lumeria demands that I bring change, renewal, connection, and my desire, she looked directly up at the real Ethan, is for a future where we need not choose between wisdom and emotion, between tradition and growth. The duplicate figures vanished, and the chamber below filled once more with brilliant light. When it cleared, Nire stood alone, but transformed. The constellation patterns on her skin had shifted, forming new configurations that pulsed with vibrant energy. Her eyes shone with a clarity and purpose that seemed to pierce through the barriers between them. "The trial is complete," Talon announced, rising from his seat. "Nire Volantis has faced her spirit's truth and emerged unbroken." The other counselors murmured among themselves, some appearing troubled, others intrigued. Zephyrin was the first to speak openly. "The trial has exposed unconventional views, High Counselor. By tradition, this would disqualify her." "By tradition, perhaps," Talon agreed. "But tradition without evolution is merely habit." He turned to address the full council. "For centuries, I have watched our people retreat further into isolation, further from the vibrant civilization we once were. I permitted this human scout to witness the trials, not to test Nire, but to test us, to see if we could recognize the opportunity before us." Ethan suddenly understood. Talon had engineered this entire situation, somehow knowing that his daughter would encounter the human scout, knowing what might develop between them. He had used their connection to force the council to confront the very issues Nire had named. A door opened, and Nire entered the observation chamber. She moved with new confidence, the light emanating from her skin casting patterns across the crystal walls. She bowed to the council, then stood before her father. "You knew," she said quietly to Talon. "You knew what would happen when you sent me to the sacred pool on the eve of my trials." A rare smile crossed the High Counselor's face. "I suspected. The resonance has been showing me glimpses of change for decades, a convergence of paths, a meeting of worlds. When the humans first arrived on Lumeria, I felt the pattern complete itself." He looked at Ethan, "though I did not anticipate quite how personal the connection would become." "What happens now?" Ethan asked, finding his voice at last. Talon addressed the council. "Nire has passed all 3 trials, but in doing so, has challenged our most fundamental assumptions. I put before the council a choice: accept her as she is, emotions, connections, revolutionary ideas intact, or reject her and continue our slow decline into irrelevance." One by one, the councillors voted, some reluctantly, some eagerly, but in the end the decision was unanimous. Nire would join the High Council, bringing with her a new vision for Lumeria's future. As the formal ceremony concluded, Ethan found himself alone with Nire in a small crystal garden atop the highest spire of Valoria. The twin moons hung large. In the sky and below them, the city glittered like a scattered handful of stars. "So," he said, attempting lightness despite the weight of what had transpired, "you're an eternal guide now. Congratulations." Nire smiled, taking his hands in hers. "The first eternal guide in 5 centuries, to openly embrace emotion as a strength rather than a weakness. It will not be an easy path." "And where do I fit on this path?" Ethan asked the question that had been haunting him since he'd realized the vast gulf between their lifespans, their worlds, their responsibilities. "That depends," she replied, her turquoise eyes searching his. "The TEI sent you here to establish connections between our worlds, did they not? To build bridges of understanding?" Ethan nodded slowly. "Yes, but I don't think this is what they had in mind." "Perhaps not," she agreed with a small laugh. "But sometimes the most important discoveries are the ones we never set out to make." She stepped closer to him. "I have convinced the Council to establish a permanent diplomatic exchange with Earth. We need an ambassador, someone who understands both worlds, who can help guide this new relationship with wisdom and care." "You want me to stay?" Ethan realized, his heart racing at the implication. "Not just as an ambassador," Nire said softly. "The resonance has bound us together for a reason, Ethan. I believe we are meant to walk this path side by side, to show both our peoples that connection across difference is not just possible, but essential." "But I'm human," he reminded her. "Even if I stayed, we'd have decades at most. while you have centuries ahead of you. Naire placed her hand over his heart, and he felt that now familiar current pass between them. The resonance flows differently here, she explained. Those who truly connect with Lumeria find that time affects them differently. It is not immortality, but an extension, a harmonization with the planet's own rhythms. She guided his hand to rest against the crystal wall beside them. To his astonishment, he could feel a subtle vibration beneath his fingertips, a living pulse that seemed to reach out to him. Lumeria is offering you a choice, Naire said. As am I. Ethan looked out at the alien landscape, the glowing forest where they had first met, the crystal city that had at first seemed so foreign but now called to something deep within him. He thought of Earth, distant and familiar, yet somehow no. Longer feeling quite like home. In Naire's eyes, he saw not just the woman he had improbably fallen for in the span of a day, but a future he had never imagined possible, a life of discovery, purpose, and connection that transcended the boundaries of species and worlds. My answer is yes, he said without hesitation, to Lumeria, to you, to whatever comes next. As Naire drew him close, the star-like patterns on her skin brightening at his touch, Ethan felt the resonance flow between them, stronger than before, a bond forming that would withstand time, distance, and difference. Above them, the twin, moons aligned perfectly, bathing them in silver light as their worlds, once separated by the vast emptiness of space, began the delicate process of becoming one. In that moment, on a crystal spire beneath alien stars, a human scout and an alien princess stepped beyond the boundaries of their separate worlds and into a shared future, pioneers of a connection that would forever change both their peoples, guided by the universal language that transcends all barriers, the resonance of two hearts beating as one.